In the somber twilight of a forgotten autumn, when the veil between worlds grows thin and the whispers of the unseen echo through the streets, there stood Claire Jennings, a woman haunted by the absence of her sister. The cool air of October caressed her face, carrying with it the scent of decay and the promise of secrets long buried. She clutched a crumpled note in her trembling hand, the last remnant of Lily's existence, a cryptic message that spoke of a place Claire had dismissed as nothing more. For a year, Claire had searched, her life consumed by the relentless pursuit of answers. She had walked the streets of their quiet city until her feet bled, had knocked on every door until her knuckles were raw, and had screamed her sister's name into the void until her voice was nothing but a hoarse whisper. But Lily remained elusive, a ghost that danced just beyond the reach of Claire's desperate grasp. As night fell and the city succumbed to slumber, Claire found herself drawn to the outskirts, where abandoned lots and forgotten alleyways formed a patchwork of urban decay. It was here, in this liminal space between the known and the unknowable, that she first glimpsed the impossible. The shadow market materialized like a mirage, shimmering into existence as the last echoes of the midnight bell faded into nothingness. Tents of deepest black unfurled from nowhere, their edges blurring into the darkness as if they were woven from the night itself. Soft, ethereal lights flickered to life, casting an otherworldly glow upon the faces of those who wandered the narrow passageways between the stalls. Claire's heart thundered in her chest as she took her first tentative steps into the market. The ground beneath her feet seemed to shift and undulate, as if she walked upon the back of some great slumbering beast. The air grew thick with the scent of incense and something older, something that spoke of ancient tombs and forgotten rituals. As she moved deeper into the market, Claire became acutely aware of the eyes that followed her. Not the eyes of the other patrons, who moved about in a dreamlike trance, but something else. Something that lurked just beyond the edge of vision, watching from the shadows with a hunger that sent chills racing down her spine. The stalls of the shadow market defied description, each one a testament to the bizarre and the impossible. In one, Claire saw a collection of mirrors that reflected not the present, but glimpses of possible futures, each one more horrifying than the last. In another, a vendor with hands of mist sold bottled emotions, love, hate, despair, each one swirling with colors that had no name in any human tongue. But it was the third stall that drew Claire's attention, a simple wooden structure that seemed to absorb the light around it. Behind the counter stood a figure shrouded in shadow, its face hidden beneath a hood that seemed to be woven from the very fabric of darkness. "Welcome, Seeker," the figure spoke, its voice a whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "What is it you desire? What would you give to find that which you have lost?" Claire's voice caught in her throat as she tried to speak, the words strangled by fear and desperation. "My sister," she finally managed to croak. "I'm looking for my sister Lily. She disappeared a year ago. The note she left, it mentioned this place." The shadowy vendor's laugh was like the rustling of dead leaves. "Ah yes, Lily. Such a bright soul she was, so full of dreams and desires. But dreams have a price, my dear. Everything here has a price." With a gesture that seemed to bend the very fabric of reality, the vendor produced a small vial filled with a swirling, opalescent liquid. "This," it said, "contains a memory. A moment from your sister's life that will lead you to where she now dwells. But be warned, child of dust and dreams, for to gain this knowledge, you must sacrifice something of equal value." Claire's hand trembled as she reached for the vial. What must I give in exchange?" The vendor's voice took on a cruel edge of amusement. "A memory of your own, of course. A moment that defines who you are. Are you willing to lose a piece of yourself to find what you seek?" The weight of the decision pressed down upon Claire like a physical force. To give up a part of herself, to lose something fundamental to her very being, it was a price that seemed too high. And yet the thought of Lily lost and alone, perhaps trapped in this nightmare realm, steeled her resolve. "I'll do it," Claire whispered, her voice barely audible above the susurrus of the market. The vendor's hand, cold and insubstantial as mist, reached out to touch Claire's forehead. For a moment there was nothing but a sense of vertigo, of falling through an endless void. And then pain, white-hot and all-consuming, lanced through her mind. Claire screamed, but no sound escaped her lips. She felt as if her very essence was being torn apart, memories flashing before her eyes in a kaleidoscope of images and sensations. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. She found herself on her knees, gasping for breath, the vial clutched tightly in her hand. The vendor loomed over her, its faceless visage somehow radiating satisfaction. "The bargain is struck," it intoned. "Drink and know the path you must walk, but remember, child, knowledge comes at a cost, and the price of truth is often higher than we can bear." With shaking hands, Claire uncorked the vial and raised it to her lips. The liquid within tasted of starlight and ashes, of forgotten dreams and abandoned hopes. As it coursed through her, images flooded her mind. Lily, standing before a mirror that showed not her reflection, but a version of herself untouched by time and sorrow. Lily handing over a lock of her hair to a vendor whose smile was filled with too many teeth. Lily, walking deeper and deeper into the shadow market, her form growing in. When the vision faded, Claire found herself changed. She knew where Lily had gone, knew the terrible bargain her sister had struck. But something else was different. A void within her mind, a blank space where once there had been something. Try as she might, Claire could not recall what memory she had sacrificed, what piece of herself she had given up in exchange for this knowledge. Rising unsteadily to her feet, Claire looked around the market with new eyes. The patrons she had dismissed before now took on a more sinister aspect. She saw the hollowness in their gazes, the way their edges seemed to blur and fade. Were these the lost ones? Those who had made bargains they did not understand and paid prices too steep to bear? A chill ran down Claire's spine as she realized the true nature of the shadow market. It was not just a place of strange wares and impossible treasures. It was a trap, a web of shadows and secrets that ensnared the unwary and the desperate. And she, in her quest to save Lily, had willingly stepped into its embrace. As Claire made her way deeper into the market, following the spectral trail left by her sister's passage, she became aware of movement in the corners of her vision. Shadows that moved independently of any light source, twisting and writhing as if alive. Voices whispered from the darkness, speaking of deals and bargains, of wishes granted and prices paid. She passed a stall where a man stood transfixed before a candle that burned with a flame of deepest black. As Claire watched, horrified, the man's features began to melt and run like wax, reshaping themselves into something alien and terrible. Yet still he stared into the flame, unable or unwilling to look away. In another corner of the market, a woman clutched a book to her chest, its pages seeming to pulse with a life of their own. As the woman read, her eyes grew wide with a mixture of terror and ecstasy. Claire could see the words on the page rearranging themselves, forming new sentences, new horrors with each passing moment. The woman's lips moved silently, reading aloud words that no human tongue was meant to utter. Claire pressed on, her steps faltering as the weight of the market's otherworldly atmosphere pressed down upon her. The air grew thick and oppressive, filled with the scent of ancient dust and the metallic tang of spilled blood. In the distance, she could hear the sound of discordant music, a cacophony of instruments that seemed to be playing in different keys and tempos, creating a symphony of madness that threatened to shatter her sanity. As she rounded a corner, Claire came face to face with a group of figures that could only be described as the Lost Ones. They moved in a shuffling gait, their forms insubstantial, as if they were made of smoke and shadow rather than flesh and blood. Their faces were blank expanses of skin, devoid of features save for gaping, tooth-lined maws that opened and closed rhythmically, as if gasping for air they no longer needed. One of the Lost Ones turned towards Claire, its eyeless face somehow focusing on her with an intensity that made her blood run cold. It reached out with a hand that seemed to be composed of writhing tentacles, its voice a rasp that scraped against the inside of her skull. "Turn back," it wheezed, "while you still can. Before you become like us, before you forget who you are." Claire stumbled backward, her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to run, to flee this nightmare realm and never look back. But the thought of Lily, lost somewhere in this labyrinth of shadows and broken dreams, steeled her resolve. "I can't," she whispered, as much to herself as to the lost one. "I have to find my sister. I have to save her." The lost one's mouth stretched into a grotesque parody of a smile. "Save her?" it asked, its voice dripping with bitter amusement. "Or join her? The shadow market claims all who enter one way or another. You've already given up a piece of yourself. How much more are you willing to lose?" Before Claire could respond, the group of lost ones shuffled past her, disappearing into the twisting alleys of the market. Their words echoed in her mind, a chilling reminder of the danger she faced with every step she took deeper into this realm of shadows and forgotten bargains. As Claire continued her search, the market seemed to shift and change around her. Stalls that she could have sworn were behind her now loomed ahead, while paths she thought she had already traveled appeared unexplored. Time itself seemed to flow differently here, stretching and compressing in ways that defied logic. She found herself standing before a tent made of what appeared to be human skin, stitched together with threads of sinew and hair. From within came the sound of weeping, a heart-wrenching sob that spoke of loss beyond measure. Despite every instinct screaming at her to turn away, Claire found herself drawn towards the entrance. Inside, she found a chamber larger than should have been possible, its walls lined with shelves upon which rested countless hourglasses. Each contained not sand, but swirling motes of light that pulsed and danced with a life of their own. In the center of the room stood a figure hunched over a workbench, its hands moving with inhuman speed as it manipulated the glowing particles. "Welcome, Claire Jennings," the figure spoke without turning, its voice a symphony of whispers. "I've been expecting you. You seek that which cannot be found, chase a shadow that no longer has substance." Claire's voice trembled as she replied, "You know me? You know why I'm here?" The figure turned then, revealing a face that was a patchwork of different features as if it had been assembled from parts of a dozen different people. Its eyes, however, were ancient and knowing, filled with a wisdom that was both alluring and terrifying. "I know all who enter the shadow market," it said. "I am the keeper of time, the one who measures out the moments of your lives, and I know the bargain your sister made, the price she paid for her foolish desire." The keeper gestured to the hourglasses that surrounded them. "Each of these contains a life, a collection of moments both lived and yet to be experienced. Your sister traded her future for a promise of eternal youth, not realizing that without a future, she would become trapped in an endless present, unable to grow or change." Claire's heart sank as the full weight of Lily's fate settled upon her. Is there any way to undo what she's done? To give her back her future?" The keeper's laugh was a dry, rattling sound. "Everything has a price, child. To restore your sister's future would require an equal sacrifice. Are you willing to give up your own time, to fade away so that she might live?" The choice loomed before Claire, terrible in its simplicity. To save Lily, she would have to give up everything, her memories, her experiences, her very existence. She would become one of the lost ones, a shadow wandering the market for eternity, while Lily returned to the world above, unaware of the sacrifice made on her behalf. As Claire stood there, torn between love for her sister and the instinct for self-preservation, she became aware of a change in the air around her. The shadows seemed to deepen, coalescing into shapes that were almost, but not quite, human. Voices whispered from the darkness, a chorus of the damned warning her of the folly of her quest. "Choose wisely," the keeper intoned, its patchwork face unreadable. "For once a bargain is struck in the shadow market, it cannot be undone. Your sister made her choice. Now you must make yours." Claire closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face as she grappled with the impossible decision before her. The weight of her love for Lily warred with her fear of oblivion, of losing herself entirely to the hungry shadows of the market. As she stood on the precipice of decision, the very fabric of the shadow market seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what price Claire Jennings would be willing to pay in her quest to save her sister from the consequences of her own ill-fated bargain. Time seemed to stretch into infinity as Claire stood before the keeper of time, the weight of her decision pressing down upon her like a physical force. The shadows of the market writhed around her, whispering temptations and warnings in equal measure. In that moment, suspended between choice and consequence, Claire felt as if she could see the threads of fate stretching out before her, each one leading to a future more terrible than the last. She began, her voice cracking under the strain of her emotions. I need to see her. Before I decide, I need to see Lily with my own eyes. The keeper's patchwork face twisted into what might have been a smile, though it was devoid of any warmth or comfort. As you wish, it intoned, its voice echoing with the weight of eons. But remember, child of dust and dreams, that knowledge often comes at a price far steeper than ignorance. With a gesture that seemed to tear at the very fabric of reality, the keeper opened a path through the shadows. The darkness parted like a curtain, revealing a twisted corridor that seemed to stretch on into infinity. Claire took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead, and stepped into the unknown. As she walked, the corridor began to change, the walls morphing and shifting like living things. Images flickered across their surface, memories, Claire realized with a start, but not her own. These were Lily's memories, playing out in vivid, terrible detail. She saw Lily as a child, laughing and carefree, her eyes bright with the promise of a future yet unwritten. Then, Lily as a teenager, her face marred by the first shadows of discontent, of a gnawing emptiness that nothing seemed to fill. And finally, Lily as she had been just before her disappearance, her eyes haunted by a desperate hunger for something more, something beyond the mundane world she inhabited. The corridor twisted and turned, leading Claire deeper into the heart of the shadow market. The air grew thick and oppressive, filled with the scent of decay and the whispers of forgotten dreams. As she pressed on, Claire became aware of a sound growing louder with each step, a rhythmic pulsing beat that seemed to vibrate through her very bones. At last, the corridor opened up into a vast chamber, its dimensions shifting and changing in ways that defied logic. In the center stood a great twisting structure that resembled nothing so much as a massive heart, its surface pulsing with an unholy light. And there, suspended within its core, was Lily. Claire's breath caught in her throat as she beheld her sister. Lily floated in a state of suspended animation, her eyes closed, her face a mask of serene beauty. But as Claire drew closer, she saw the truth of her sister's condition. Lily's skin was translucent, revealing the shadows that writhed beneath, consuming her from within. Her hair, once a vibrant auburn, had faded to a dull gray. And though her face was youthful, there was an agelessness to her features that spoke of the terrible Barga.
Lily!
Claire cried out, reaching towards her sister. But as her hand touched the surface of the heart-like structure, a jolt of pain shot through her arm, sending her stumbling backward. She cannot hear you, came a voice from the shadows. A figure emerged, tall and gaunt, its face hidden beneath a hood of deepest black. She exists now in a state beyond time, beyond life and death. This is the price of eternal youth, to be forever frozen in a single moment, never changing, never growing, never truly living. Claire turned to face the newcomer, her eyes blazing with a mixture of fury and desperation. Who are you? What have you done to her? The figure's laugh was like the rustling of dead leaves. I am the merchant of dreams, child. I gave your sister exactly what she asked for, youth eternal, beauty undimmed by the ravages of time. She made the bargain willingly, offering up her future in exchange for an endless present. But this isn't living, Claire protested, gesturing towards Lily's suspended form. She's trapped, consumed by shadows. This can't be what she wanted. The merchant of dreams tilted its head, a gesture that somehow conveyed both amusement and pity. Ah, but it is precisely what she wanted. Humans are such curious creatures, always wanting what they cannot have, never satisfied with the gifts they've been given. Your sister feared the passage of time, the inevitability of age and decay. So I offered her a way to escape it, at a price. Claire's mind raced, searching for a way out of this nightmare. There has to be a way to undo this, to give her back her life, her future. Everything has a price, the merchant repeated, echoing the words of the keeper of time. To restore your sister's future would require an equal sacrifice. Are you willing to pay it, I wonder? To give up your own time, your own life, so that she might live? The choice loomed before Claire once more, terrible in its simplicity. To save Lily, she would have to give up everything, her memories, her experiences, her very existence. She would become one of the lost ones, a shadow wandering the market for eternity, while Lily returned to the world above, unaware of the sacrifice made on her behalf. As Claire stood there, torn between love for her sister and the instinct for self-preservation, she became aware of movement in the shadows around her. The lost ones were gathering, drawn by the scent of indecision and despair. Their hollow eyes fixed upon her, their mouths gaping in silent screams of warning. "Choose," the merchant of dreams urged, its voice taking on an edge of hunger. "Choose before the market chooses for you." Claire closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face as she grappled with the impossible decision before her. The weight of her love for Lily warred with her fear of oblivion, of losing herself entirely to the hungry shadows of the market. And then, in the depths of her despair, a memory surfaced, the memory she had traded for knowledge of Lily's fate. It came back to her in fragments, flashes of emotion and sensation. She saw herself and Lily as children, making a promise to always look out for each other, to face the world together no matter what came their way. In that moment, Claire knew what she had to do. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steady despite the fear that coursed through her. "I'll take her place, give Lily back her life, her future, and I'll remain here in her stead." The merchant of dreams' hood tilted, a gesture that might have been surprise or satisfaction. "Are you certain, child? Once the bargain is struck, it cannot be undone. You will become part of the market, a shadow among shadows, while your sister returns to the world above with no memory of what transpired here." Claire nodded, her resolve hardening with each passing moment. "I'm certain. Lily deserves a chance at life, at a future. If this is the price I have to pay to give her that chance, then so be it." A sound like the tolling of a great bell reverberated through the chamber, and Claire felt the weight of cosmic forces converging upon her. The merchant of dreams raised its arms, its voice taking on a resonance that seemed to shake the very foundations of reality. "The bargain is struck," it intoned. "A life for a life, a future for a future. Let it be done." The heart-like structure that held Lily began to pulse with increasing intensity, the shadows within it writhing and twisting as if in agony. Claire felt a tugging sensation in her chest, as if something essential was being torn from her very being. She gasped, falling to her knees as waves of pain washed over her. Before her eyes, Lily's suspended form began to change. Color returned to her skin, the shadows beneath it receding like a tide going out. Her hair regained its vibrant auburn hue, and her chest began to rise and fall with the rhythm of natural breath. As Lily stirred, showing signs of life for the first time in over a year, Claire felt herself fading. Her vision began to dim, the edges of her perception blurring into shadow. She tried to call out to Lily, to say goodbye, but found that she no longer had a voice with which to speak. The last thing Claire saw before the darkness claimed her was Lily's eyes fluttering open, confusion and disorientation evident in her gaze. And then, nothing. Claire Jennings ceased to exist as a singular entity, her consciousness fragmented, scattering like motes of dust in a sunbeam. She became one with the shadow market, her essence merging with the very fabric of this liminal space between worlds. Time lost all meaning. Claire existed everywhere and nowhere, her awareness spread across the entirety of the market. She saw countless deals struck, witnessed the desperation and desire that drove mortals to bargain away pieces of themselves for fleeting moments of happiness or power. And always, she searched for some remnant of herself, some core of identity that she could cling to in this sea of shadows and forgotten dreams. How long she existed in this state she could not say. It might have been days or years or millennia. But slowly, agonizingly, Claire began to coalesce once more. Not as a human, not as the woman she had once been, but as something other. She found herself standing behind a stall in the market, a hood of deepest black obscuring her features. Before her stretched an array of bottles, each containing swirling mists of memory and emotion. And as a lost soul approached, drawn by the siren call of the impossible. Claire felt words forming on lips she no longer possessed. "Welcome, Seeker," she whispered, her voice a symphony of shadows. "What is it you desire? What would you give to find that which you have lost?" The cycle continued, the shadow market claiming new victims even as it offered the illusion of fulfilling their deepest wishes. And Claire, once the seeker, now the purveyor of broken dreams, played her part in this eternal dance of desire and consequence. But deep within the shadows that now comprised her being, a spark remained, a flicker of the love that had driven her to make the ultimate sacrifice. And in rare moments of clarity, when the veil between worlds grew thin, Claire would remember the sister she had saved and find solace in the knowledge that somewhere, in a world of light and life, Lily lived on. As the shadow market shifted and changed, appearing in new cities and drawing in fresh souls hungry for the impossible, Claire's stall became known among the lost ones as a place of both salvation and damnation. Those desperate enough to seek her out found themselves faced with choices that would echo through eternity. Each bargain struck a reflection of the one that had brought Claire herself into the market's embrace. Some came seeking lost loved ones, much as Claire had once done. To these she offered vials of memory, each one a double-edged sword that would lead them to their heart's desire while simultaneously erasing a crucial part of themselves. Others sought power, or knowledge, or escape from the mundane world above. For these, Claire had an array of artifacts, each one imbued with a fraction of the market's eldritch power, and each one carrying a price far steeper than its new owner could possibly aim. But it was the seekers of second chances that truly tested the remnants of Claire's humanity. Those who came to her stall with regret, etched into their very souls, begging for an opportunity to undo past mistakes, to rewrite their personal histories. To these, Claire offered the most dangerous bargains of all, the chance to go back, to relive crucial moments with the knowledge they now possessed. But the cost was always the same, the certainty of their current existence, the very timeline they sow. As she dealt in the currency of hopes and fears, memories and futures, Claire found herself becoming something more than just another vendor in the shadow market. She became a nexus of sorts, a focal point for the market's intricate web of cause and effect. Through her, the stories of countless souls intertwined, creating patterns that rippled out across realities. And always there was the hunger. The shadow market itself seemed to pulse with an insatiable appetite, forever seeking new souls to draw into its twisted embrace. Claire, now as much a part of the market as the shadows themselves, felt that hunger as keenly as if it were her own. It drove her to offer ever more tempting bargains, to weave ever more intricate webs of desire and consequence. But even as she played her part in this cosmic game of give and take, Claire never forgot the spark of humanity that had led her to this fate. In quiet moments, when the market slumbered between manifestations, she would retreat into the depths of her fragmented consciousness, sifting through the memories that remained to her like precious gems. She remembered Lily, not as the shadow-consumed creature she had found in the market, but as the vibrant, laughing girl she had been before. She remembered their childhood promises, the bond of sisterhood that had ultimately led her to make the ultimate sacrifice. And in remembering, Claire found the strength to resist the market's all-consuming hunger, if only for brief moments. It was during one of these moments of reflection that Claire became aware of a disturbance in the market's usual ebb and flow. A presence that felt at once familiar and impossibly distant. As she emerged from her reverie, she found herself face to face with a figure she had never expected to see again. Lily stood before her stall, older now, lines of experience etched into a face that still held echoes of the youthful beauty she had once traded everything to preserve. But it was her eyes that truly caught Claire's attention, eyes that held a wisdom and sorrow far beyond their years. "I've been looking for you," Lily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "For so long I've felt like a part of me was missing, like I'd forgotten something crucial. And now I remember. Claire, my sister, what have you done?" The weight of recognition crashed over Claire like a physical force. For the first time since her transformation, she felt the full impact of her choices, the true cost of the bargain she had struck. And in that moment of clarity, she knew that her journey through the shadow market was far from over. As Lily reached out, her hand hovering just above the surface of Claire's stall, the very fabric of the market seemed to hold its breath. The shadows deepened, coalescing around the two sisters as if drawn by the gravity of their reunion. And in the distance, barely audible above the market's ever-present whispers, came the sound of a great mechanism grinding into motion, the wheels of fate turning once more, ready to present a new set of choices and consequences. Claire's non-existent heart ached with a mixture of joy and sorrow as she beheld her sister. She longed to reach out, to embrace Lily as she once had in the world above. But she knew that such contact was impossible now. She was a creature of shadow and memory, no longer bound by the laws of flesh and blood. "Lily," Claire whispered, her voice a chorus of echoes. "You shouldn't be here. The market, it's not safe, not for you, not again." Lily's eyes widened, a mixture of recognition and disbelief playing across her features. "It really is you," she breathed. "Claire, I remember everything now. The deal I made, the years I lost, and what you did to save me. How could you make such a sacrifice?" Claire felt a surge of emotion, love, regret, and a fierce protectiveness that transcended her transformed state. "How could I not?" she replied. "You're my sister, Lily. I promised I'd always look out for you, no matter what." As the sisters stood there, separated by the boundary between shadow and flesh, the market around them began to shift and change. Stalls twisted into new configurations, pathways rearranged themselves, and the very air seemed to thicken with potential. "You have to leave," Claire urged, feeling the market's hunger rising around them. "This place, it doesn't let go easily. I made my choice, Lily. I gave you back your life, your future. Don't throw that away by staying here." But Lily stood her ground, a determination in her eyes that Claire recognized all too well. "I'm not leaving without you," she declared. "There has to be a way to undo this, to bring you back." The shadows around them writhed at Lily's words, and Claire felt the weight of cosmic forces converging once more. She knew, with a certainty that transcended mortal understanding, that they stood at a crossroads of fate. Whatever happened next would have consequences that would ripple out across realities. "Lily, please," Claire begged, her voice taking on an edge of desperation. "You don't understand what you're asking. The bargain struck here can't simply be undone. There's always a price." But even as she spoke, Claire felt something stirring within her, a spark of hope that she had thought long extinguished. For the first time since her transformation, she allowed herself to consider the possibility of returning to the world above, of reclaiming her humanity. The air around them crackled with tension as the market itself seemed to react to this possibility. Shadows deepened, coalescing into shapes that were almost, but not quite, human. The lost ones gathered, their hollow eyes fixed upon the sisters with a mixture of longing and warning. From the depths of the market came a sound like the grinding of ancient gears, and the merchant of dreams materialized before them, its hooded form seeming to absorb the light around it. "So," it intoned, its voice carrying the weight of eons, "the prodigal returns, and with such noble intentions. Tell me, child, are you prepared to pay the price to undo what has been done?" Lily stepped forward, her chin raised in defiance. "Whatever the cost, I'll pay it. Claire sacrificed everything for me. It's time I returned the favor." The merchant's laugh was like the rustling of dead leaves. "Oh, but it's not so simple. Your sister's bargain was a thing of beauty, a perfect balance of sacrifice and desire. To undo it would require an equivalent exchange, a life for a life, a future for a future." Claire felt a chill run through her spectral form as she realized the implications of the merchant's words. "No," she said, her voice firm despite the fear that coursed through her. "Lily, you can't. I won't let you trade your life for mine." But Lily's resolve only seemed to strengthen. "It's my choice, Claire. Just as it was yours when you saved me. I've lived the life you gave me, experienced things I never would have otherwise. But it's been hollow, incomplete. I've always felt like a part of me was missing. Now I know why." The merchant of dreams raised its arms, and the market around them began to shift and warp. Reality itself seemed to bend, creating a bubble of timelessness around the three figures. "The offer is made," it declared. A life freely given in exchange for one trapped in shadow. But be warned, such an exchange is not without consequences. The balance must be maintained. Claire wanted to protest, to find some way to protect Lily from the terrible choice before her. But she found herself paralyzed, unable to intervene as the cosmic forces at work in the shadow market converged upon them. Lily took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders as she faced the merchant. "I understand," she said, her voice steady. "And I accept. Take my life, my future, and give Claire back hers." The air itself seemed to hold its breath as the merchant considered Lily's words. Then, with a gesture that tore at the very fabric of reality, it began the ritual of exchange. Claire felt a tugging sensation deep within her being, as if her very essence was being pulled in two directions at once. She saw Lily gasping, her form beginning to blur at the edges as the shadows of the market reached out to claim her. In that moment, as she teetered on the brink between shadow and flesh, Claire made a decision. With every ounce of will she possessed, she reached out, not physically, but with the full force of her transformed consciousness. She grasped the threads of fate that bound her to the market, and instead of allowing them to unravel, she pulled. The shadow market itself seemed to recoil as Claire exerted her will against the cosmic forces at work. She felt the weight of countless bargains, of innumerable lost souls, pressing down upon her. But she also felt something else, the love that had driven her to sacrifice everything for Lily, the spark of humanity she had clung to through her long years in the market. "Enough!" Claire's voice rang out, no longer a whisper but a command that shook the very foundations of the market. "No more sacrifices, no more lives torn apart. This ends now." The Merchant of Dreams reeled back, its hooded form rippling with what might have been shock or fear. "Impossible," it hissed. "The bargains cannot be broken. The market must be fed." But Claire stood firm, drawing upon reserves of strength she hadn't known she possessed. "The market has fed for too long," she declared, "on hopes, on dreams, on the desperation of those seeking the impossible. No more." As she spoke, Claire felt herself changing once more. The shadows that had comprised her being began to solidify, taking on substance and form. She felt the weight of a physical body, the rush of blood in her veins, the beat of a heart she had thought lost forever. Lily watched in awe as her sister transformed before her eyes, the Claire she remembered emerging from the cocoon of shadows. "Claire," she breathed, reaching out to touch her sister's now solid form. "How?" Claire smiled, feeling tears, real human tears, welling up in her eyes. "Love," she said simply. "Love and the will to defy fate itself." The Merchant of Dreams howled, a sound of rage and frustration that echoed through the market. This cannot be. The bargains must be honored. The price must be paid. But even as it spoke, the market around them began to change. The shadows retreated, revealing the lost souls trapped within. Not as monstrous shades, but as people, confused and afraid, but undeniably human. Claire turned to face the merchant, her voice ringing with newfound authority. "The price has been paid 1,000 times over. In sorrow, in loneliness, in the years stolen from those who came seeking the impossible. It ends now." With those words, Claire reached out and grasped the very fabric of the shadow market itself. She felt its weight, its history, its hunger, and she began to unravel it all. The market shuddered and quaked as Claire exerted her will upon it. Stalls collapsed, pathways twisted and broke apart, and the boundary between worlds began to thin. The lost souls, freed from their bargains, began to fade away, returning to the world above or passing on to whatever lay beyond. The Merchant of Dreams let out a final, terrible scream as it too began to unravel, its form dissolving into motes of shadow that scattered on a wind from nowhere. As the shadow market crumbled around them, Claire turned to Lily, grasping her sister's hands tightly. "We need to go," she said urgently. "This place is falling apart. If we stay, we'll be trapped in the void between worlds." Lily nodded, squeezing Claire's hands as they began to run. They raced through the disintegrating market, dodging falling debris and leaping over chasms that opened in the ground beneath their feet. All around them, The shadows were receding, revealing glimpses of the world above. A park, a city street, the familiar skyline of their hometown. With a final burst of speed, the sisters threw themselves forward as the last remnants of the shadow market collapsed behind them. They tumbled onto soft grass, gasping for breath as they looked up at a sky filled with stars. Real stars, not the eldritch lights of the market. For a long moment they lay there in silence, overwhelmed by the reality of their escape. Then slowly, they turned to look at each other. "Is it really over?" Lily asked, her voice trembling. Claire nodded, feeling the solid ground beneath her, the cool night air on her skin. "It's over," she confirmed. "The shadow market is gone, and we're free." As the full weight of their ordeal settled upon them, the sisters embraced, tears flowing freely as years of separation and sacrifice were finally acknowledged. They held each other tightly, neither willing to let go for fear that this too might prove to be an illusion. But it was real. They were home, truly home, in a world untouched by the shadows that had consumed so much of their lives. As dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Claire and Lily stood together hand in hand. They knew that the road ahead would not be easy. There would be questions to answer, explanations to give, and a life to rebuild after so long apart. But they also knew that they would face it together, their bond stronger than ever, tempered by the trials they had endured. The shadow market was gone, its bargains undone, its power broken, and in its place stood two sisters, reunited against all odds, ready to embrace the future they had fought so hard to reclaim. As they turned to walk home, Claire cast one last look over her shoulder at the empty lot where the market had stood. For a moment, she thought she saw a flicker of movement, a hint of shadow that didn't quite match the growing daylight. But then it was gone, dispelled by the warm rays of the rising sun. Claire smiled, squeezing Lily's hand as they set off towards home. The shadow market was no more, its hunger finally sated by the power of love and sacrifice. And though the sisters knew that the memory of their ordeal would stay with them always, they also knew that they had emerged victorious, their bond unbroken, their futures bright with possibility. As they walked away, their footsteps fading into the early morning quiet, the last whispers of the shadow market dissipated on the breeze. The cosmic balance had been restored, the cycle of bargains and consequences brought to an end. And in its place, a new day dawned, full of hope and the promise of a future unbound by the shadows of the past.